Hola, chess people. Coach Matthew back with a game review, and we're going to use a different format for the presentation in terms of the notes. We're going to be using Notepad and put it on both sides of the board so it's a little cleaner. We can put up some more information. This is a game to add to your 500. Now, when I say 500, what does that mean? What does that refer to? The average grandmaster, not that there is such a person, the average GM knows 500 games by heart, as in they can explain every single move in these games to a complete beginner in such a way that the beginner will understand why the moves are being played. 500. On this channel, we're going to try to make a serious dent into 500. Now, these games can be anybody's games, your own games, your favorite Masters games, all your favorite Masters games, miniatures, traps, whatever you want. 500 might seem sensational, but it's very doable if you're consistent. Already, I think we've uploaded 11 games towards the 500 in about the last week, and we're going to continue to add more and more. So, you learn 10 a week or 1 a week, whatever it is, you can do the math, get to 500. Now, whether or not you want to be a master, and your average national master has 200 games committed to memory, so on and so forth. So it's not about making that title or blah blah blah. That's not what it's about. What it's about is playing passably well. And whether or not you're a GM, we need to avoid mistakes and be able to play passably well no matter who the opponent is. Understanding games and moves in these games can go a long way towards that, and it's also a lot of fun. So this game is a Blitz game. This is probably the only Blitz game that's going to be in the dash towards 500. I don't teach Blitz. I don't encourage my students to play Blitz, depending on who they are. A lot of players, and a lot of adults especially, allow Blitz to ruin their game. As in with Blitz, you play one game, you play another, you play another, you play another. Do you review any of them? The average player doesn't review a single Blitz game they play. Not with a fine tooth and comb as they should. So they move very quickly, don't learn from any of the mistakes necessarily, repeat the mistakes, and start to develop the bad habit of not reviewing their games, not identifying mistakes, moving too quickly, so on and so forth. I do not encourage students rated, there's not really a rating range, but if you're under 1500, 17, 1800, you probably have really no business playing Blitz. It can be fun. I'm not trying to take that away. Sometimes you're in a time, you're in a time pinch and you want to get in the game. I understand, but one of the biggest faults of younger chess players is them not learning from their own games. They don't analyze their own games, and Blitz adds to that problem. It can be very dangerous. Now, some students do play Blitz and they do analyze all of their Blitz games, and that makes them even stronger because they're getting in that many more games and they're learning that much more about chess because they're getting in more games because it's a smaller time control. And if that's you out there, wonderful. Keep it up. Play more Blitz. Awesome. But use caution with Blitz. And we're talking G5 for the time control. Now, this is from 2016, the Ultimate Blitz Challenge. Player with the white pieces is Wesley So, who at the time of this recording is currently tied for first at the 2021 United States Chess Championships, tied with Lenderman and Sam Sevian. Of course, we're rooting for Sevian, rooting for Wesley and Lenderman. They're all wonderful players. And this is my favorite Wesley So game, even though it's a Blitz game. I saw it live on their stream from St. Louis. Grandmaster Ashley and Yaz were doing the commentary, and it was fantastic. The commentary contributed to the excitement overall. It was fun to watch Kasparov play again. When I started getting into chess big time, when I got bit by the chess bug, Kasparov was my favorite player when I worked at Hewlett-Packard as an information product engineer. Coach Matthew, what is that? It's a technical writer. But we like to call ourselves engineers, even though we were word engineers? Word engineers? I don't know. But that's what we were. And Kasparov was my favorite player, and I remember being in the office I shared at HP, and Cupertino off Valco, and he retired. Saw it online, and I was sad. He was my favorite player. I really enjoyed his games, and was wondering whose games am I going to look at now? Well, everyone else's, of course. So Kasparov comes out of retirement every now and then to play publicly, and it's really fun to be able to watch him play here and there. And of course, it's one of the wonderful things about chess. You can play at any age. So you'll see, Karpov play somebody in their teens. It's a regular thing. It's generations can play other generations in chess. So let's get to the game. This is a G5, St. Louis 2016. Wesley has the white pieces, Kasparov has black. And to be very clear, I have no business telling either of these players what to do or not to do over the chessboard. Not at all. That's not what this is about. We're learning from this game. First of all, it's a lot of fun. We're not trying to point fingers at somebody making a mistake. We're trying to just improve our chess. And the intended range here, once again, this is for the U2100 crowd. So let's get to it. Wesley's got white. Knight f3. Plays for the center, but doesn't put a pawn in the center. This is fine. G6. I think we know what black's next move is going to be. Bishop G7. If you make a hole for the bishop to fianchetto in, and you know what? Let's add that to the notes. Black will fianchetto. They haven't done it yet. Let's add it. Not yet. Not quite yet. Let's let Kasparov fianchetto first. Okay, E4 and then bishop G7. Now, I don't speak Italian, but as I understand it, first of all, this is a fianchetto. It's not fianchetto. The CH is pronounced like a K. So this bishop here, this is a fianchettoed bishop. It's on the long diagonal, and it's stable. So this bishop is quite happy. Generally speaking, it's quite happy. So that's a fianchettoed bishop. Wesley plays D4. Now what has white obtained? What do we call this pawn center? We call it the ideal pawn center. So white has the ideal pawn center. Let's add that to our notes. It plays for the center and gives you space. Ideal pawn center. Okay. D6 and C4. White takes more space. If you want to annex space, move a pawn. Let's add that to our notes. Add. Annex space. Move a pawn. Okay. White's clearly got more space. Bishop G4. Against the rule of knight before bishops. Black has not developed a knight and has developed both bishops. So let's add to our notes. Knight before bishops is the standard minor piece development procedure. But we don't see that here. Not by the black pieces. Now, knight before bishop is... No, knight before bishops. Knight before bishops. Capablanca. Get a knight into play before you develop the bishops. And also, before you move a bishop, you need to know where it belongs. Now, if you play G6, you're playing bishop G7, sure. But that white square bishop, does it belong on G4? Well, the idea is to remove the defender of the D pawn. So black wants to remove this knight so they can then take on d4. This is a very common theme for these fianchettoed bishops to seek this kind of play. To have the other bishop, this bishop that's fianchettoed, could be an Owen's defense, hitting e4, then remove the knight on c3. This bishop's hitting d4, and the other bishop goes to remove the defending knight. This is a very common thing. But does the bishop belong on the h5 d1 diagonal? I don't think so, and it has invaded and it cannot hold the g4 square forever. Black cannot hold this square. So let's add to our notes. Know where it belongs. And let's also just write down invasion. Is a big deal in chess. And that's one thing I see beginning players, beginning students violate more than any other principle in chess. They invade and don't realize the consequences of their actions. Invasion is a big deal. Think about some stranger walking their dog, and their dog's in your front lawn. Do you really want that? Probably not. Get it out of there. Don't shoo it away, but you know what I mean. The invading opponent can be problematic. They're up to no good. They're up to mischievous actions. So, bishop g4. White stops the threat to the d-pawn by, and of course you want to avoid the doubled f-pawns, generally speaking. Bishop e2. If the bishop takes on f3, the bishop will take back, of course, and knight c6. Develop with a threat. Let's add develop with threats to our notes. When you bring on a new piece, make a threat. Make threats. Keeps the opponent busy. So knight c6. White has a nifty defense for the d-pawn. Wesley plays knight b to d2. So what if black decides to take on d4? What would happen? Well, let's say knight takes. What would white do? White has what we know as the rubber band motif. White has an elastic knight in this position. The knight would take on d4. And of course, if the bishop takes on d4, the bishop will take on g4. White is up a minor piece. Black has no compensation for the material. Pawn isn't good enough. So that won't work. So what if instead the bishop takes on e2? Here we would see the knight take instead of the queen. The knight would take to save itself. So let's see this again. This knight on f3 captures on d4 and also sustains the ally it discovers in attack 4. So this knight is looking like a rubber band here with this triangular area. This is the elasticity of the knight. Elastic knight, aka the rubber band motif. So the knight is tactically defending the d-pawn, this idea. So of course black does not take. Let's add that to our notes. The elastic knight, which is also known as the rubber band motif. Elastic knight. Very common in the opening. Well, I don't want to say very common. You'll see it if you haven't already seen it. The rubber band motif. The knight can be a little tricky that way. In our opening traps videos, we'll showcase a couple more elastic knights. So black plays e5 since you can't take on d4. And Wesley takes space. Pushes to d5. That knight has to move. It gets kicked to e7. And Wesley plays soundly here. the bishop on g4 has invaded, he puts the question to the bishop. Either take the knight or get out. Put the question to invading pieces. Get them out of your territory. h3 is a good decision. The bishop retreats, keeping both bishops. And c5. c5 is a nice, energetic move. It plays in the direction of the pawn chain. White's main pawn chain is this. So White's going to play on the queen side. White will seek to use their pieces on the queen side to improve their quality and seek play. Play in the direction your main pawn chain points, so your pieces can improve their quality. Let's add that to our notes. Play in the direction your main pawn chain points. Points to, towards, same thing. Now, this is not safe. So Wesley is potentially sacking a pawn, but if black does take, white gains a significant initiative. Should black take the pawn? Well, no, hindsight is 20/20. White gets considerable play. And black needs to start playing on the king side. The center's locked. Black can't really play on the queen side. White's going to take the space there. Black needs to play on the king side. Black takes the c pawn. Frequently, when you see a pawn in the center or extended center move, the space it vacated, the square it left behind, it just moved from, can be used for an allied piece. So at the c4, c5, the c4 square is vacant, and now the knight can go there. And the knight is coordinating with the other knight on e5, and if you want to keep that pawn, you have to play pawn f6. So black is trying to keep the pawn, plays f6. Okay? Let's keep the initiative. White plays a very strong move here. d6. Does black want to play pawn takes pawn? Do you really want this knight coming in to d6 as the black pieces? No, that is a disaster. You do not want that. And you also don't want to lose your knight, so you have to move your knight. Knight c8. Not a good rank for the knight to be on, but not much choice. Okay. Bishop e3 develops with a threat to take the c5 pawn. Black sustains it with the b pawn, and white castles. Castle first. Let's add that to our notes. Castle first. Why? Well, to safeguard your king, and so you can get a rook into play naturally via the center. Castle first. Get a rook into play first. Get both rooks into play first. So, castle first. Wesley has done that, and black is encouraged to do the same here. Get the king, not castle first, of course, but castle. Get the king at the middle. White is going to connect the rooks shortly and finish development. Black's pieces are looking a little not so good. Black needs to get the king out of the center, get these pieces out quickly, very quickly. And I don't mean because it's blitz, meaning moves-wise, quickly. But instead of developing a new piece, we see bishop c6, threatening the d pawn, which is a really good pawn. So what do you do about the d pawn? Well, it's either you use it or you lose it. So you have to take on c7. You will not allow black to take it for free. So pawn takes. And as black, do you take the pawn or do you take the queen? If you take the queen, you leave the c7 pawn on the board, which is really risky and very dubious. White's rooks will own the d file, use it to invade, and invade on d8, and black cannot stop that. If the queens were to be traded off evenly, this d file is bad news bears for the black pieces. This is a disaster. What may happen next, I'm not quite sure, but white is going to double up on the d file. A lot of these moves play themselves. Kasparov takes the c pawn. Okay. b4 is a very energetic move. What is Wesley doing with this move? He's trying to keep his initiative, number one, and number two, seek play on the queen side. What are the targets? The queen is always a legitimate target, provided you can get to her, and Wesley's trying to do just that. He's trying to open up the c file so he can seek play against it. Pawn takes, and rook a to c1. Get a rook into play early. Let's add that to our notes. Now, did white go out of their way to get this rook into play early? No, I don't think so. Giving up the pawns for this initiative, I like the idea. Compare the rooks already. White's rooks, one of them is already in play. The other one is ready to go after the queen moves. Black's rooks are going to need a little bit of help to actually come into play. Allied pieces will have to move out of their way. Rook a to c1. White is seeking play on the c file. Knight g to e7. What move will black play next? Clearly black wants to castle short. If black castles short, all bets are off in terms of white's lasting initiative. If they can safely castle, well, then they'll be that much closer to getting all their pieces out. Just move the c8 knight. So how do you stop the opponent from castling? If you castle first, you want to prevent the opponent from castling. Keep their king in the center and open lines of attack to get to their king, generally speaking. So can you prevent black from castling here? The answer is yes. What do? You make it too dangerous for them to castle, which means you need to be able to attack the g8 square. Wesley prevents castling, develops a new piece, connects the rooks all at once. If black castles, we have a discovery. And where does the knight go for the discovery? Does it take on b6? Maybe it takes on b6, and then it maybe it takes let's try this again here. If it takes on b6, you take the rook. If you take on e5, notice how these moves come with check. So if you take on e5, the king gets out of check, and then the knight can coordinate against c6. They'll take back, and you're going to use your bishop to attack, and then this other knight may well take on e5. A lot of green arrows, but basically if they castle, check, king moves, take, and okay, there. Attack it a bunch of times. Gang up on the pinned piece. Black cannot castle. So what do? Well, we're going to make a note, prevent the opponent from castling. Let's add it to the other side. If you have castled, prevent the opponent from doing so. Keep their king in the center, meaning don't let it castle, not necessarily in the center of the board. So we see h6. What else is there to do? I don't know. Rook f to d1. Finish development. All of White's pieces are now ready to go. White has finished development. Let's add that to our notes. Not that finish. Finish development. Get all the pieces into play. Chess is a team game. Team game. Look at Black's pieces compared to White's. There is a vast difference. Pawn b5. Well, it's go time. White cannot improve any more of their pieces. Now it's a matter of opening lines of attack to get to the targets. What are the targets? Well, you've got the queen. How do you get to her? Well, the bishop's in the way. The king is a target. So White is seeking play against these targets. Buckle up, or wear a helmet, or both. Here we go. White to play and win. This is Blitz. Wesley plays these moves instantaneously. Knight c takes e5. Well, if Black does nothing, you're just going to chop on c6, and that is no good for Black. Black takes. Okay, so the knight got out of the way, so you can pick on the pinned piece. The target is the c6 bishop. It is pinned because of the good rook. So what do you do to a pinned piece? You put pressure on the pinned piece. Put pressure on the pinned piece. So you need another attacker. You want to attack it again. Wesley does just that. What do you do to a pinned piece? Attack it again. Let's add that to the notes. Again. All right. Rook b8. And Wesley plays this move immediately. This is a very, very slick move. Wesley is a calm customer. You want to keep the bishop. The bishop is the key to this attack because Black's counterpart, the c6 bishop, is pinned twice. So keep the white square bishop. You back off. Wesley backs off immediately. He just plays bishop a4 after rook b8. Black's in a lot of hot water. The queen gets out of the pin. And Wesley's attack is blistering. He is relentless with his play. A la Paul Morphy. Rook takes the bishop. Well, you have to take back. And that exposes the king. The knight is now absolutely pinned. Queen gives check. If you interpose with the queen, you drop the knight. So the knight interposes from the 8th rank. If the king moves, we're going to see checkmate. So you can't play king f8. If you use the queen, it gets nasty. Bishop check, and the queen's a goner. Can't do that. So what else is there? You have to use the knight. So knight 8 goes to e7. And bishop c5. Notice how many squares in Black's territory White is attacking. Attack squares in the opponent's half of the board. Okay, so the knight was pinned. Both knights are absolutely pinned. So the rook goes to sustain c6, but it's too little, too late. Bishop takes on e7. Kasparov resigns here. What would happen if he were to take back? would see a complete liquidation and this king getting checkmated. So instead of that, Kasparov resigns here, and I don't think he was a happy camper. He kind of he didn't look so happy after this game. But are you ever really happy after you lose a Blitz game? No. So at this position, Black resigns. Wesley So plays these middle game moves immediately. This game was very reminiscent of polymorphy, as the commentators were saying live when it was played. Yeah, Morphe would get the rooks into play, only move a couple of pawns. And here we see Wesley get the rooks in play, and Black really doesn't. Their reaction, this rook is just reacting too little, too late. This was a really, really, really enjoyable game to watch live. This is Wesley So with the white pieces taking down Kasparov in a Blitz game. But you don't get to see Kasparov play that often, so that was neat. And the brilliance of Wesley's moves in this game were... this is just a spectacular game. After it was played, I remember lecturing it immediately, and what was funny is some of the students who have multiple coaches, all their coaches were lecturing this game right after it was played, which was kind of funny. But everybody really enjoyed this game after Wesley played it. Wesley So with the white pieces against Kasparov, 2016. St. Louis, Missouri. U.S. Championships, we've got Wesley tied with Sevian and Lenderman in the open section. And in the women's championship, Carissa Yip is sole first. It's going to be over with in less than a week, so enjoy the rest of the championships from St. Louis. And thank you for watching.